They were digging near the old Roman road, just outside what is now Munich. Ancient graves, worn bones, the usual echoes of the migration age. Nothing strange, until they lifted her skull. It didn't curve like a Bavarian's. It rose tall, sharp, unnaturally vertical, like a tower sculpted from childhood. A head that had been bound, stretched, shaped for years, not by accident, but by design. But here's the contradiction. Her grave was local. The layout, the artifacts, even the direction she faced, all standard for a 6th century Bavarian woman. No foreign tokens, no warrior's ornaments, just a modest burial. Ordinary, until you looked up, because her head was speaking a different language. This kind of skull, tower-shaped, almost architectural, is found hundreds of miles to the east, among the steppe nomads, the Huns, the Goths, places where status was carved into bone, a lifelong marker of identity. You were born with a soft head and a destiny wrapped in bandages, and yet here she was laid to rest beside blue-eyed locals with round skulls and light hair, in a cemetery that had never seen a woman like her. Who was she? Not a raider, not a local girl with eccentric parents. This was something else, something planned. Her skull a billboard, her body a question buried for 1,500 years. She has no name, no written story, just a bone silhouette that doesn't belong. But now her DNA is talking, and what it says doesn't just rewrite her story. It opens a door. Because if she wasn't Bavarian, if she was shaped by a culture far from this valley, the next question isn't what she was, it's why she was brought here, and what power her presence held. She never chose it. By the time her skull began to rise, bound tightly in cloth and pressure, she was still learning how to breathe, how to blink at the sun. Her cradle wasn't soft. It was strategy. For months, maybe years, someone somewhere wound her infant head into a monument. Not an accident, not abuse. A ritual, intentional, measured, and irreversible. This was artificial cranial deformation, a global signal, carved in bone. In some worlds, it meant nobility. In others, divine beauty. But here, in the hills of early medieval Bavaria, it meant something stranger, something silent, because only adult women had it. Not a single child, not a single boy. As if these towering skulls didn't grow here, they arrived. And that's the twist. They weren't shaped by Bavarian hands. They were shaped far away and brought in, imported like precious artifacts. But why only women? These weren't village customs. This wasn't a local beauty ideal passed through mothers and daughters. This was a foreign symbol, deliberately carried in by people who knew what it meant. Every curve of that skull told a story. One of birthright, one of origin, one of status, etched before she could speak her name. Steppe cultures like the Huns, the Sarmatians, the Alans, they bound heads like this to declare something. You didn't earn it. You were born into it. And for a girl to carry that signal across the continent meant she mattered. But in Bavaria, she was buried quietly. No gold, no weapons, just a skull, tall, proud, foreign, surrounded by the bones of a people who didn't look like her. Not physically, not genetically, and not culturally. So the question burns louder now. Where did this begin? Because if the skull tells one story, the DNA inside it tells another. And that's where the map starts to change. She looked like she belonged. Buried like the others, wrapped in the silence of time. No foreign jewels, no battle scars, no whisper of war. Just a woman in the soil, under Bavarian sky. But then, her DNA began to speak. Scientists pulled genetic threads from 41 graves, weaving lineages, tracing origins. Most were what you'd expect. Sons of the Danube, daughters of Central Europe, blonde hair, blue eyes, the familiar face of the early Germanic world. And then, one genome broke the pattern. Hers, the Tower Skull bride. Her DNA didn't point north. It spun east. It whispered of the Balkans, of Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia. Lands far from Bavaria's forests. Lands with their own gods, their own bloodlines. She didn't just look different. She was different. Where Bavarian women carried the light, eyes like sky, hair like wheat, she brought the dusk. Brown eyes, darker tones, a face made of other stories. And yet she lay among them. No sign of violence. No mark of captivity. Not a prisoner. Not a slave. She was placed here. Deliberately. Chosen. Because her genes don't scream of conquest. They murmur of movement. Of journey. Of a body that crossed borders. Not swords. And still there's more. Because while most of the elongated skull women match the Southeast, Slavic, Balkan, Byzantine roots, one of them wasn't from Europe at all. Her bloodline didn't just travel across mountains or empires. It crossed continents. She had the skull, the shape, the height, the unmistakable silhouette of status. But inside was something no one expected. When scientists cracked her genome, sample AD_1108, they found a code that didn't belong to Europe at all. 1/5 of her DNA was East Asian, not Slavic, not Roman, not even Hunnic in the classic sense. This was deeper, stranger, a thread pulled from the open steppes of Central Asia, where winds carve mountains and riders vanish into dust. What was she doing here? In a Bavarian grave, under Christian soil, among men who had never seen a woman with her face. Her ancestors might have followed banners that thundered across Eurasia. Migrants, warriors, or something else. Emissaries from a world far beyond the forests of Germania. The rest of her genome matched the Balkans. That part made sense. But this was an echo from the Silk Roads, stitched into a woman who never left a single written word. She could have carried legends, languages, memories of plains where no Bavarian had ever stepped. And yet, she died here. Alone. Buried with no sign of conflict. No proof of resistance. Not taken. Not lost. Placed. This wasn't a simple migration. It wasn't even a treaty. It was a collision of DNA, of geography, of worlds that should have never met. One woman, carrying a story that crossed deserts, kingdoms, entire civilizations, and then ended quietly beneath a Bavarian sky. But why? Why bring her here? And more importantly, what did they gain in return? She wasn't stolen. She was offered, not with force, but with silence, the kind that moves between thrones and tribal chiefs. A girl, bound from birth, not in chains, but in destiny. She didn't come to Bavaria as a wife. She came as a signature. In the 6th century, treaties weren't sealed with parchment. They were sealed with wombs. A daughter sent east or west, her body the promise of peace, her children the price of alliance. This was power, disguised as tradition. Marriage used like a weapon. And she was one of many. Each tower-shaped skull marked a diplomatic transaction. Not mass migration, but precision placement. A political gift wrapped in foreign bone. Their graves say so little. No gold, no inscriptions, no proof of their status. But the DNA doesn't lie. They weren't from here. They were placed here, in villages that never practiced skull binding, among men whose genomes are entirely local, surrounded by grave goods that blend them into the background, while their bones scream something else. They were assimilated on paper, but in flesh, they were the outsiders who carried new bloodlines into dying tribes. The women who changed the map, not with swords, but with sons. And maybe they were respected, or maybe they were tolerated. Exotic, necessary, but never quite one of them, because while their skulls rose high, their names disappeared. No oral legends, no epics, just the silence of earth and the contradiction of ritual. So what did the locals see when they looked at her? A bride? A pawn? Or a stranger with a head that marked her as something too different to name? The alliances were made. But the question no burial can answer is, how did the living feel when these women came home? He would have looked like his father. Fair skin, flaxen hair, eyes like a pale northern sky. A boy running through Bavarian fields, speaking the language of his land, never knowing that half of him came from somewhere else. But look closer. The curve of his brow, the depth in his gaze. Not quite blue, not quite Bavarian. His mother's eyes, brown, warm, older than this village. No one wrote her name. No poets sang her story. But her shadow moved quietly through his face. The tower-skulled brides left no monuments. But they left sons. And through them, they left genes. Phenotype doesn't lie. Blue eyes, blonde hair, Those were local signatures. But the DNA of the mothers rewrote the palette. Darker hair, richer tones, lactose intolerance, even subtle shifts in immunity. Small things. Invisible at first. But over generations, the mosaic changed. 1,000 years later, a farmer in Bavaria might wonder why his daughter has olive skin in the summer. Why her curls fight the brush. Why she looks like no one in the village, but somehow like everyone. Science can trace that. Not to Rome, not to Germania, but to the Danube, the Balkans, and the wide-open steppes beyond. It's not migration in the way textbooks teach it. Not war. Not conquest. Just a woman, quietly raising children in a place that once saw her as foreign. Over time, the skulls stopped rising. The bindings disappeared. But the blood? It stayed. The brides became grandmothers. Their stories lost. Their genes not. And now, when scientists sequence the DNA of those old bones, they don't just find foreign ancestry. They find fingerprints, layered into lineages, hidden inside what looks familiar. The question is, did Bavaria absorb these women? Or did these women reshape what Bavaria became? For a generation, the tower skulls rose. Strange, elegant, unmistakable. Heads that told a story before a word was spoken. Brides shaped by distant hands, placed in Bavarian soil, like foreign seeds. And then they stopped. No warning, no decree, just silence. By the mid-6th century, the bindings were gone. The tall skulls vanished. The ritual erased. One lifetime after the first arrival, the shape was extinct. Why? Did the politics shift? Did the alliances break? Or did the daughters of these women choose not to bind their own? Maybe the practice became unfashionable. Maybe it marked them too clearly as other. Or maybe something deeper. Maybe the tower wasn't just a skull. Maybe it was a flag. And once the war ended, there was no one left to fly it. Cranial deformation takes effort. It needs commitment, community, belief. You don't stop that overnight. Unless you need to. Unless survival means blending in. And that's the quiet tragedy. The skulls disappear, but not the people. Not their children. Not their genes. Culture fades faster than blood. We see it all the time. The things you give up just to stay. One generation lives loud. The next whispers. But their DNA? Still there. Still glowing under the microscope. Still whispering secrets in bone. Because while the tower may have crumbled, the foundation stayed buried. And when scientists listen close, past the phenotype, past the grave, they hear echoes of something else. Something they didn't expect. Because these women brought more than just shaped skulls and foreign genes. They carried something untraceable by tools. Something that still lingers. The question is, what was it? It wasn't a sword that divided them. It was a cup of milk. In early medieval Bavaria, the local men, blond, broad-shouldered, born of this soil, drank milk as adults without a second thought. Their genes carried mutation, lactase persistence, a superpower hidden in the gut. But the brides, the ones with the tall skulls and the Balkan blood, their bodies told a different story. Most of them couldn't digest it. Not in adulthood. Not like the locals. Their DNA lacked the northern mutation, the one that let you thrive on dairy in a cold climate. And that matters more than it sounds. Because adaptation isn't just war and terrain. It's digestion. It's metabolism. It's what your body accepts and what it fights. In their genomes, you see the tension. Genes that handle different diets, different diseases, different microbes, even. Every bride that crossed into Bavaria brought more than her skull shape. She brought invisible survival strategies, some suited to the steppe, some not. And over time, those differences reshaped the local code. Not overnight, not with drama, but quietly, generation by generation. A gene here, a mutation there. Immunity tweaks, metabolic shifts, silent adaptations passed from mother to son. Europe's diversity wasn't written by empire alone. It was stirred in kitchens, layered in marriages, passed through bloodlines forged over breakfast. Science now tracks it all, in the enzymes, in the alleles, in the way a modern European processes sugar. These brides didn't conquer anything. They blended. And in doing so, They rewired what it meant to be local. But then a pattern emerged. One too complex to be random, too coordinated to be chance. Because these weren't isolated exchanges. These women, their genes, their routes. What if they weren't just passengers? What if they were part of a much larger design? It started as a local oddity, a strange skull in a quiet cemetery. But then they began to appear everywhere. Across the Danube, into the Balkans, threaded through what is now Romania, Serbia, even brushing the edges of the Caucasus. The same towering deformation, the same profile, women, always women, bound in infancy, moved in adulthood, buried far from where they were born. And their DNA? It doesn't stay within borders. It stretches. From Gothic valleys to Slavic plains, from steppe camps that once trembled under Hunnic hooves, to Germanic villages trying to hold together the ruins of Rome. This wasn't random. This was design. Each skull, each woman, each grave, part of something coordinated. A network of blood and bone, where alliances weren't signed, they were born. Not ink on treaties, but genetics in motion. Diplomacy carved in flesh. You can trace it now. The migrations that don't follow maps, but lineages. The strategy not of kings, but of mothers, sent to bridge tribes, to calm wars, to create new loyalties through children who belong to both sides, and to neither. Every woman a thread. Every marriage a knot in the fabric of post-imperial survival. This is what empire leaves behind, not just ruins, but quiet agreements buried in cemeteries. And somewhere out there is a grave that breaks the pattern. A single burial that doesn't fit. One woman, one story, sealed in silence. But her genome holds the key to all of it. She was built to be seen. That towering skull, sculpted from the moment she could cry, wasn't just a shape. It was a symbol, a broadcast, a declaration of where she came from and who she was meant to be. But when she died, that signal went silent. Her grave didn't echo her origins. No exotic jewelry, no foreign rites, just a standard layout of a Bavarian burial, ordinary, familiar, forgettable, as if someone had tried to erase her. And for over 1,000 years, they did. She vanished, not violently, but quietly. No records, no names, no myths, just dirt and time. But then came the genome, the code in her bones, the whisper in her cells. Science reached where memory failed and pulled her back, piece by piece. Now we know. She wasn't local. She wasn't from here. But she was buried here, married here. Her children grew up here, ate from this land, spoke in its dialect. And that tension between where her body came from and where her bones were laid to rest, it's more than genetic. It's existential. What does it mean to belong? To be foreign in form, but familiar in fate? She was a treaty, a bridge, a sacrifice, made of flesh, given without inscription. And yet, she changed the bloodline of a nation. You can see her legacy, not in statues, but in cheekbones, in melanin, in the silent ways bodies remember what history forgets. She was erased in life, but resurrected in data. A ghost with no name, but an undeniable fingerprint. So the real question now isn't who was she? It's, how many more are out there? Buried, silent, waiting. How many others lie beneath our feet? Whose DNA rewrites everything we thought we knew? Every grave opens a door, but not just to the past, to you. Because this is an ancient history locked in stone. It's living, breathing inside your blood, inside your smile, inside the way your body responds to milk, to sunlight, to silence. We've traced a skull, a mother, a legacy built from DNA, not myth. But she's just one. There are thousands more, unnamed, unmarked, whispering through bone and genome, rewriting maps, blurring borders, redefining identity in real time. So here's the question. What are you made of? Which strangers shaped your story? Which forgotten migration lives in your skin? Which ancient treaty gave you your grandmother's eyes? You don't need a grave to tell you that. You just need to ask the right question. If you're fascinated by lost histories and ancient DNA mysteries, subscribe for more untold stories. And tell us, what identity do you carry in your bones, without even knowing it?